accept this fragrant point of view. You see, a person's life is written in the words that they paid for. You know that costs something that's subdued. Forget all you see and hear in the so-called public town. Embrace this life and how you live and what you do. Yeah, treat everybody with the peace you have inside. Do unto others like the good book says to do. Now I had to find several reasons to trust this. So many times I've heard the same lines through and through. You see, you walk down the road many times so blindly. Only thing that matters is the path you choose. A simple man would have gotten busted. A righteous man would have been accused. Looking down this road forever after. We all got something to lose. Deal me a hand now, Mr. Lucky. A straight of flush or a pair of twos. It really don't matter what I get dealt for this hand, this time. It doesn't really matter if I win or if I lose. Save your opinions for some other time. Didn't really write this song to amuse. Thinking about your life and what you're really after. Don't hide yourself behind another excuse. A rich man would have got just what he paid for. The poor would sing a song or two. Looking down this road forever after. We all got something to lose.
Okay, we'll do a mic check to start us out like we always do. Anybody in the chat can hear me, say yay. All right, we're good. All right, that song we played from our good friend Steve Harvey, Something to Lose. Hope you all like it because we do. And we got that from our good friend at the Critical Post Chicago, Scott Pollock. So just a shout out to those two guys. Really don't have anything to start off with on announcements other than the retail store is getting caught up with back orders, although it seems like we still have a product or two, one of them being the sweatpants that are a little bit lagging, but we are getting caught up. So we appreciate everybody's patience on that. Hey, Steve Harvey in the house. Hey, Steve. Love that song, man. Everybody does. Steve's got a YouTube channel, so go visit it and listen to some of his great music. I know he does some live streams. Man, he's a talented guy. Okay, I'm going to bring in my sidekick, Lady Justice. Say hello to the people.
Hello, people.
How
How
are
are
you
you
doing?
this evening?
Yeah, there we go. She's a little bit honked at me tonight because we were going to do a big segment on a new subject, and I kind of chalked that down a little bit because I think we need to do some more research on it. Not that I
Oh
haven't.
no, 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 no.
Okay, here
Let's
we
tell it like it is.
go. Okay,
We're not doing that.
go for
No.
it. Go
The
for it.
real story okay, is that I spent time today sending my documents and yes, this is a subject that's huge and it's technical, which is not my specialty. It's not my forte, so to speak. I don't know a whole lot about technology in depth as in depth as this would be. But I was I was doing my best to get all my documents together. I send them over. I talk to Paladin this afternoon. We have this big long conversation. Then all of a sudden he drops on me at the very end. No, we're not going to talk about that tonight. That's just too much information. We need to have this. We need to have that. And I'm like, what? What? And then
GPS signal lost.
Well, that was weird. And so then after I say, okay, well, we're going to talk about, well, this is a free for all, honestly, at this point. We're definitely going to talk about some information that everybody's been wanting to discuss, which is financially related. But then we start the show and he says, okay, we're going to go ahead and talk about your subject first. What? Did I pretty much sum it up there, Paladin? Is that pretty much how this day has gone? Yeah, that's
Oh
exactly.
yeah, I think so. I think you covered it. um, and Steve Harvey was in the house. I don't know if I said that, but we're glad to have him here for however long he's here. Okay,
Yeah,
so
thanks for the song, Steve.
yeah,
It's great.
yeah, great song. So okay, I want to say my part, and then you can do your thing, because I don't want to downplay the significance of this because I do really think that this is can be a very important part of our future. It has to do with five and that letter that falls between F and H. And Lady Justice has been digging deep into this rabbit hole for weeks, if not a couple of months, and she's been sharing with me the information that she's been finding. And so, because I'm not very technical either, I'm sort of looking at it, taking the broad view, so to speak. Um, and what I do know from looking at this, based on the way the players are lining up for it and against it, and the way that it is not showing up in the media and in the news, based on how very, 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 very important it is, that to me tells me something is big here. So um, we wanted to talk about it tonight, but we had some other subjects that we were going to go over, and I felt like we need to dedicate a full show to this. And in addition to that, I think we also have some more work that we probably should do so that we, since we're not that technical, are maybe better able to explain it to everyone in the audience so that they understand it. So that's kind of why I kind of put the kibosh on it tonight, but we did want to introduce it so that people are aware, and maybe we can get some people looking into it and doing their own research and maybe helping with this big reveal that we're going to come up with. Okay, so do your thing about that, because I know you want to talk about it.
So with that being said, I'm going to not talk about this big information. I'm going to hit the highlights, let's say, but there are a lot of different highlights I would think. And so the main focus here would be the company that seems to be stepping up to the plate and was approved by the FCC as far as operating at a broadband that seems to be getting under the skin of many agencies, government agencies, including aviation. In the private sector, the Department of Defense, the Department of Energy, the Department of Interior, 32 plus senators are seemingly up in arms about it. But yet AG Barr and Pompeo are incredibly supportive of it. And the former NASA administrator that was the longest standing NASA administrator in the history of NASA, from what I understand, says that this particular service and company and operation for the GWIS at this frequency is critical to the future of America. And I am saying that verbatim based on an interview that that former NASA administrator was in on Tucker Carlson, which is no longer available, which is interesting because it was less than a month ago. And that company is called Legato. This is a company that's been through the ringer as far as when it was started, how it was started, what happened in previous days when it was actually under another name called Light Squared. And it went bankrupt. I want to say it was around 2012. Then it was brought out of bankruptcy, which is also a very interesting story that I'm not going to get into. But when we have our full show on, we will. I had some investors step up to the plate, very big ones, as a matter of fact. Chase Bank included, I believe, if I remember correctly. And the previous owner still holds a certain amount of shares and has retained a certain amount of ownership in it as well under Harbinger Capital Partners. But Legato is a GWIS type of service that would be operating at a lower frequency level, mid broadband spectrum that, according to the Commerce Department, could essentially add another $274 billion to the U.S. economy and create over 1.3 million jobs. And this is a mid-band spectrum that is vital to the U.S. leadership in next generation communications networks, given its low latency, wide coverage, and high data capacity characteristics. I don't know the ins and outs as far as the level of safety it offers over, say, the GWIS in the higher frequencies, but I am to understand that it is, it tends to be, leans towards more of a safer type of communication. And so there is a lot of angst within the Department of Defense. Actually, it was written 2 days ago in the fiscal year 2021 summary from the Senate Arms Committee for the National Defense Authorization Act, that they would prevent the Department of Defense from using funds in order to comply with the FCC order to approve the function for Legato until they can get a technical review with another company and write up a report for appropriations on how those would be spent. And the Department of Defense isn't going to jump hoops to do that because the Department of Defense is against this decision from the FCC also. So there is a lot going on with Legato, and due to the fact that, you know, there is a big push on both sides to either let it go through or to put the kibosh on it altogether. And when we talk about this in great detail on the other show, we'll get into the level of frequency and the, you know, the operational level that they were at, which was reduced by what seemingly seems to be about 93%, which is very odd. I mean, you know, these things are incredibly intriguing to me, how this is all playing out. But when we have that show and we can talk about it in great detail, and I would love to have a lot of interaction during that show, because again, like I said, not hugely technical in this department, and I'm sure there are a lot of people out there that have the expertise, you know, to kind of give some insight on some of this information. So it can be a group project, let's say. That wouldn't be a bad idea. We can look at that as a group project. But there's a lot of information, a lot of activity with this company, and to me, I will say in let's say technology for dummies, I'll approach this. There seems to be a huge issue with GPS, GSSS positioning, GPS, the market, the financial market, and the concern about how Legato might interfere with that. And one tends to go down a path and wonder if that could possibly have something to do with computers trading with other computers, and maybe some trading that is occurring even on a criminal level. So just throwing that out there, and I think I hit the highlights.
Paladin? Trading. Now, do you mean like stock trading? Surely
Yes.
You don't mean that. There can't be anything.
I do.
There can't be anything criminal going on there.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm just speculating, that's all. Just speculating.
Well, the interesting thing when you brought this to me was who the sides were, how they lined up. And this is before the FCC made their decision to award the contract or whatever it was to Legato. And that was what Barr and Pompeo were on the for side. And then there were a lot of people on the against side, including your boy Esper, right?
Did you have to say my boy? You know, the one thing you're going to try and throw in my face. Really. Listen, we don't know if he's playing chess, right? We just don't know. You never know. We won't know until it's all done. But yeah, yep. Esper said it was it would put the military in peril. As a matter of fact, if they allowed this to proceed, that was his word, peril.
And I watched that one news conference where someone asked him the question, and he did not want to go there, didn't want to talk about it.
No, he just said they asked him why he thought that the FCC would make this decision, and I mean, he had been pretty vocal about it on Twitter, and then he turned around and said at a press conference, just shut the question down basically, and said, well, I don't know, you'll have to ask them that. But is staunchly against moving forward. So.
And I don't know. I just find this very, very, very interesting because you have, you know, the way the government's set up, you have these agencies who are supposed to make the decision. And in this case, this is the FCC. And yet it appears, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it appears to me it looks like this could be headed to the the legislative branch, where they may step in and try to make it a law that they can't use Legato. Does that sound like that could be in the future?
Well, I think what they're doing is trying to ensure that they can't financially pursue any any action that would assist in any redirection for appropriation of funds to on their GPS side or their system side. So therefore, in order for them to move forward, they would have to do this technical review, and and that would be done by the Department of Defense, who obviously is against that anyway. So I mean, it seems like to me it's a stall tactic, really.
Right.
But it is interesting, and this bill is, they released the summary 2 days ago, but they are not releasing the full bill. I'd say it won't be released until next week. So I am very interested in reading that. And to me, it's National Defense Authorization Act is it just keeps popping up. It just keeps popping up in all of this, and that is the summary that was released. It was in that for that fiscal year 2021. So and this is something that seems to be inflating the tempers of senators. His name's escaping me right now. Inhofe.
From Oklahoma.
Yeah. What is just out of all of the things that were included in the summary, and this summary goes into information about Huawei, which I've been looking at for quite some time. Huawei, it goes into information about Russia, China, even protesting and the rioting, and nothing infuriated Inhofe more than Legato and the FCC's decision. So that's just an interesting topic.
Yeah, okay. In your opinion, do you think this is somehow possibly related to the quantum financial system and or the quantum internet?
Oh yeah, I think it all could be related. Absolutely.
And what about the International Space Station and the most recent launch they had? I know how you like to watch those astronauts up there spacewalk. I'm giving away all your secrets. I should shut up.
Well, I think we're watching a movie when we're watching that, because we're not watching what they're really doing. We're not seeing what they're really doing up there, in my opinion. But yes, it's absolutely related. I think the space station has been, when you're talking about countries that have been at odds, or have had all of these tensions, for decades upon decades, yet they can agree to these, international treaties, so to speak, and especially in regards to space, that baffles me somewhat. And the fact that that we haven't committed to renewing that treaty in February of 2021, and that Trump went forward with the plans for harvesting resources from the moon, the water ice and the other resources that could be up there, despite the objections of other countries. I absolutely do think that there is a lot to what's on the space station. It has a lot to do with our future, and as Daniel Golden stated, that it seems that Legato and operating at this mid band spectrum is critical to the future of America.
Yeah, and and I guess and as I think we both have been very interested in the Space Force from the standpoint of Trump talking about it so much and at the rallies. And so I think this, at least in my opinion, and you can weigh in on this too. Do you think that this has all ties in together with the Space Force?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I do think that it was necessary to remove the, because, there have been secret space programs for, how many years now,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
forever. However, I think that those programs ramped up significantly, but not in our favor, in the year 2001. And I think that, we are looking at some questionable individuals that were involved and still are involved in a military capacity, that it was absolutely necessary to remove, this program and the pursuit of, what it would entail, for the future. It was absolutely necessary to remove that, and from the stronghold of the Air Force.
Yeah. And okay. And I think, well, I think we got some big things coming technology wise. And I think it would be very interesting, at least to me. This is always what's interesting in this kind of a situation, to see who lines up on what side, because that usually is very revealing as far as who are controlled by the deep state and who aren't. Would you,
Mm-hmm.
we agree with that?
Yes. Yeah, I would agree with that. I do see some comments in the chat, and I didn't know
Do
how
you,
long
do,
we were actually
do
going
you
to
want to?
talk about this,
Well,
but
I saw one that might interest you. Did you want to did you want to address the Antarctica situation?
well, gee.
Well, that, it was brought up by our good friend MSATS 88, and I think
Oh, really? I
yeah,
missed that.
that
Well,
was a
could
question.
you tell me what the question was? Oh, what about Antarctica?
It's just open ended. What about Antarctica? I know that's one of your favorite subjects, so this might be a good time to
Well,
talk about it
okay, well, we can, sure.
a little
Sure.
bit.
What do you want to know about Antarctica? And I'm going to give them time to answer, but I do want to say I'm seeing a lot of chatter in the chat about, the space is fake, and the moon is fake, we've never been to the moon, blah blah blah. I'm going to tell you right now what I think, and just let's all calm down and take a breath, because everybody has their right to their opinion. Okay. I do believe that we have been completely boogered, I guess you could say, in a lot of ways when it comes to space, and how our how our Earth functions as a spinning ball in the universe. I'm not saying that I buy into all that, okay, but I do believe that there is space. I absolutely believe that. I absolutely believe that that we are not, alone in this universe, that we don't live under a plastic bubble. I don't believe all that. I don't. I do believe that we went to the moon. I also believe that simultaneously at the time that we went to the moon, and, our Neil Armstrong put his foot up there, and, and all that, that was completely fabricated simultaneously. I mean, if you want to think about the, the connection, the phone call, all of the what we're seeing, what we see in the reflection of the astronauts' helmets, all of that. I don't believe what we saw is real.
So you're saying that the Stanley Kubrick studio is probably accurate from what we actually saw?
Absolutely. But I do believe we were on the moon. I do believe that, but we did not go probably on the technology that we've been told about. We probably didn't go, it could have been simultaneous. It could have been a different time, but I absolutely believe we've been on the moon. I believe we could have been on Mars. I mean, I believe it's a possibility. I absolutely do. But we have not been told the truth about you know, how the moon, you know, operates, how our Earth, you know, exists. I do not believe that any of that is true. Anything. I think we've been completely bamboozled as far as, you know, what we've been told.
Well, and I guess I'll relate a quick story that I told you this week because, you know, some people weren't around in the 60s, but that was the whole space program was just a huge, huge, huge deal. I was in grade school then. Through most of that, I remember being on vacation in Florida with my family and, you know, coming inside to watch the small step for man and giant leap for mankind moment in a hotel in Florida in, I don't know, June or July, whenever that was, in that summer of '69, I believe. But you know, the John Glenn thing, the Tang orange juice. You know, we were all supposed to drink Tang orange juice because that's what the astronauts drank. And of course, whenever, you know, you're asked in grade school, who do you want, you know, what do you want to be when you grow up? Well, astronaut was right up there with fireman and policeman and some of the other president and, you know, some of the other things. So it was a huge, huge deal. A lot of focus was put on the space program. So looking back for me, I find it very interesting that we did all that work, so to speak, and we did all that exploration, and then went to the moon a few times, and then all of a sudden, boom, nothing, no more. That's kind of sat dormant for about 50 years or so. So, you know, looking back on the history of all of that, that's the part that I find very interesting. I just wonder what the answer to that question is. Why did we stop? Any idea?
I can tell you what former NASA engineer said.
Okay, share.
There was a trip made, and I don't remember if it was Americans or if it was Russians, but there was a trip I went. It was in the 70s, around 76, 77, somewhere around there, maybe 79. I honestly can't remember the details. It's been a while since I listened to it, but what we were told was by someone told us, "You're not ready, don't come back." And we haven't tried to go back since. That's what was told. And you know what? I mean, I make light of it because it's a funny story to me, but I do believe that we've been, because we weren't going there for the right reasons. We weren't doing things for the right reasons. You know, there was no disclosure to the public, the world, you know, really. And we weren't going there with the intention for, you know, for what I believe we're supposed to be, you know, exploring and evolving for. We were doing it for all the wrong reasons. And so it was stopped. And in my memories, and we shared this the other day too, for me, you know, what the real kibosh was on space, it was in the 80s, and I remember as a kid watching the you know, the launch, and it was the shuttle, or the Challenger, where they sent the teachers up there.
Yep.
And it crashed. And you know, I watched that live as a kid, and you know, when that occurred, obviously, you know, the world was like, oh my gosh, you know, that was devastating, and we're done with space for a while. That's something we're just not gonna, you know, we're not going to take part in anymore. But since that occurred, there's one person in particular I think of a video I watched not too long ago. Well, it was a while ago, and there was some information out there on the I can't remember if he was Hawaiian, maybe Hawaiian or Asian. One of the teachers that was along for the ride, and they all perished in that when it
Well,
blew up.
that's what they say, right?
Yes, right. But this guy, who they found, tried to say, "Oh, that's not me. That's not me. I'm his twin. I'm his twin brother," because they had the same last name, and so on and so forth. I can't remember all the documentation that they had for this guy, but the problem is they then retrieved the teacher astronaut's birth certificate, and he didn't have a twin. So and they found one of the gals as a professor at some university, and there. So
yeah, I think they've actually run them all down. I saw.
Yeah, most of them,
yeah.
I think. Yeah. And
Yeah.
so I think that there was that was a production. That was another production on making sure that that we could see, from a world perspective. I mean, everybody's watching this, and that we can see from live how dangerous this is, and why we're not going to put people in jeopardy anymore. So that's what I believe.
Yeah, and I think that was a big deal. We've got a picture up of Nixon talking to the astronauts we did have. And I think that was a big deal for Nixon too, to be the president while we put the first men on the moon. So that was probably enters into it partially. And then of course Kennedy made this famous speech that we wanted to get to the moon, before the decade was over. And so I think that maybe had something to do with it too. But having lived through that era of space, it just was really strange that we did all that work and spent all that money to get up there, and then when we did, we stopped. And I always wonder whether Apollo 13 was supposed to be the harbinger to say, well, maybe it's not so safe up there anyway. We were lucky to get those guys back, so maybe we shouldn't do it anymore. But I think we did have I think there was maybe
Take the
one
next
or
right onto Southeast Parkview Crossing Drive.
Oh my goodness, sorry.
I thought there was one or two Apollo missions after 13. I'm not sure, but anyway, it seems like there was at least one other mission, or maybe two more missions after that. So anyway, okay, well, and you don't want to say anything about Antarctica? You don't want to talk about? Did you want to talk about the rainforest?
Castle Rock?
Yeah. Just leave them with something, and then we'll move on to the financial stuff.
Okay, I find it fascinating. I'm going to leave you with this, because that is definitely something that we can talk about on another show as well. But I do believe that I do find it fascinating that 2 months ago, there was this article written in a scientist journal website, and for 4 years of research in this, and I think it's called Anita, their experiment Anita, where they were throwing these balloons up and doing something with the balloons, and and then identifying the particles from the balloons or something. I have no idea. Again, I'm not a scientist either, just so you know. I know that's hard to believe. But anyway, they were 4 years of research. They come out and they say, gee, we might have a mirror world here, like a parallel universe, right? Fascinating, isn't it? Where left would be right, right would be left, and up would be down. So 4 years of research, 4 years plus of research, that they determined that this might just be an area where we have a parallel universe. And yes, there are other articles that support the fact that thousands and thousands of years ago, Antarctica actually was a rainforest. Very interesting. But 2 months later, which would have been, 6 days ago, they released another article where they immediately tried to debunk, the mirror universe, the parallel universe, by saying, well, actually, actually, we think that it was reflections from ice formations. And I'm not lying. This is a scientific paper that was written, and people have tried to use this to say, see, that's not true. It was completely debunked. That that didn't happen. And 9:30. Okay, sorry about that. But that it was. That they wrote this paper, and in the paper it said that it was a possible explanation that it was reflections and ice formations. So what is Castle Rock?
Yeah, just explain Castle Rock.
Castle Rock is an actual rock. It's a rock. It's a huge rock in Antarctica, and it is, you can find a picture of it for some reason in the Air and Space Museum on the Smithsonian Institute website. The Air and Space Museum has a picture of Castle Rock, Antarctica on it.
And is there not there's
a naval force station.
Yeah,
very close to it.
Yeah, a station there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, we've got them pumped up on that. All right.
Well, Doc House Q mentions a Castle Rock.
Yeah.
I do find it rather interesting that, a couple of days ago, 8 days ago, was it? That Trump did write a memorandum, or not an executive order, but a memorandum on Antarctica, and wanting an answer back within 60 days from several different agencies, the Department of Energy and the OMB, and I really can't remember everybody involved. Homeland Security, I believe, many agencies on ice-breaking fleets to have in operation in Antarctica for exploration and recovery of resources. And the Coast Guard was involved in that too. And they are to, from June 9th, I believe it was the date that was released. And from 60 days from that date, they're to report back to him on the status of that project. So just thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, and this is maybe a good time to segue into Trump and Melania travel in the U.S. in their RV.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we're talking about travel. We might as well segue into that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I've always wanted it. I've been seriously considering selling my house and living in an RV.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think Trump meant the same thing, but.
Well, what do you think he meant? What do you think he meant?
Well, I don't know about you, but I am having a hard time envisioning Trump and Melania driving across country in an RV. That's just me. So.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know. What does RV stand for besides recreational vehicle?
I know. Revaluation.
Oh, wow. That must be it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Trump he drops these things and has been dropping them ever since he's taken office. So, yeah, I don't see him. Can't you just picture that Trump driving this big RV and a parade of Secret Service agents in their cars behind him and in front of him and going down the road? I mean, I don't see that. So, yeah, I believe that he was talking about the revaluation of currencies, which also relates to the financial reset, which I think is fastly approaching. Hopefully, I'll
It
know
certainly didn't
something
have anything to do with what he was
with
talking about
yeah,
that day.
driving around, seeing the
I mean,
country.
just
Yeah.
out of nowhere, he's like, what do you call those things? What are they? An RV, right? So, yeah, definite sign.
So, what do you have to say about that?
Don't
I
put
kind
me
of,
on the spot like that.
well,
No, no, you're
I
gonna
kind
go
of,
ahead with that.
I kind of exhausted myself this morning in our Discord chat talking about that.
No, you know what? Just exhaust yourself a little more.
Uh, well,
I think you should talk about I mean, if you're all fine with it. I mean, the idea behind, okay, let's talk about, this what the base would be as far as the reset, what would be used, what was supposed to be injected, or what the idea behind that is, and then we can go from there, which would
well,
be your currency.
okay. So, yeah, I mean, this is part of the financial reset, the global reset, the new financial system, whatever term you want to use. That has always been part of it. The dinar has been a subject for at least 10 years, if not more. Other Zim currency, Zimbabwe, the Dong, Vietnamese Dong has been another currency that's been talked about. And so recently, I guess in the last maybe 2 or 3 weeks, there's been a lot of information out there about that, about the tiers, about this, about that, the 800 numbers. And so I was asked that this morning in the Discord chat. And so I finally reluctantly answered it. So I guess I'll just say it here. As far as I'm aware, and I have asked the question of our network every time that the reval has come up, is the public going to get paid? The public going to get paid? And the answer is always no. So I kind of disclosed that this morning, and I think that undoubtedly disappointed some people, and I understand that, but that's not the reason for the revaluation of the currencies is not to make a bunch of people millionaires. It's to kickstart and help lay the foundation from a liquidity standpoint for the new financial system. And that's always what it's been about. So I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I don't think I will be, but I could be wrong. And, maybe everybody will be able to cash out their dinar at, the hoped for rate of $3. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think it's probably going to be pennies or nickels or dimes. But it could be. It very well could be. But I don't think that's the issue. I think the issue is what's the purpose of a new financial system? Because the problem with this whole thing, this whole financial system, this whole money thing is that this has been a mechanism that they have used to control us for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And we need to break through. We need to break that. Because I think if we're an evolved society, we will get to the point where money will not even be part of our society. Evolved societies don't use money because they don't need to use money. They have everything that they need. So I think that's where we were. I think that's where we're going. I think this revaluation is a transition step to get to the point where at some point in time we won't be using money. I think it's going to be a way to basically bring up the third world countries to equalize everything throughout the planet so that everybody's on the same footing. Everybody has infrastructure, everybody has electricity, running water, those kinds of things that we in the United States and the developed countries take for granted. And I think once that's accomplished, then I think new technology will be released, the technology that's been suppressed, that's been kept from us, that we have paid for, that they have used to control us for a long time. And I think then at that point, we're going to see a whole new world. So that's my opinion in a nutshell. And I know you and I have discussed this numerous times. So why don't you impart your opinion and your knowledge and your thinking on this whole subject?
Okay, well, before I do that, I'm going to say, because when you threw that wrench in the whole how the show's going to go, and I came in here before the show started, and I let people know this was going to be an interactive show where they can put their questions in the chat, and that we would do our best to answer those questions. So, and I've seen throughout this, our conversation here, I've seen, I'm not sure if it's the same person who's putting it in here, but it is something that I see often. So I am going to start off by reading some of these questions. And one is, people definitely want to know if we're looking at Nesara Jasara. Got it.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. It's not like I haven't answered that 10 or 20 or 100 or 500 times already, but I will do it one more time.
Okay.
There is no legislation, Nesara. Okay. You guys can look it up. You can read the guys. The name escapes me. The economist who came up with that concept. He tried to get enough sponsors to get a bill introduced in Congress. He never got enough. He wrote books too. I think one book, maybe two. And it didn't work, guys. And basically part of it is I believe no more taxes and, debt forgiveness and all these different things. And then we've got the Congress or whatever where, special forces went in at night and held guns to their head to make them sign the bill. And then there's the famous non-existent Rehnquist decision. And like I've said before, this whole thing is a Bush crime family con is what it was. And, you can track a lot of that stuff back in the beginning to this lady named herself the Dove of Oneness, who basically parlayed this into money, monetary gain. I don't think she's still with us. I think she passed away a few years ago. The Nesara is not a real bill. It was never passed, never was introduced. You can check the Library of Congress or the congressional record to see. I mean, and you should read the guy's books, because he wrote about it. And his one regret in one of his books, he said that he was sorry that he ever introduced this because of all the fraud and all the fraud and all the scams that arose out of it. So, and we still see the Nesara Jasara. And of course, some people have taken this to, Archangel Michael walks, the halls of the Pentagon and this kind of stuff. And so anyway, I just want to address that. Now, having said all that, if things go well and things go according to plan, what we will see is something very, very close to that. Although I'm not sure how it's going to work from the standpoint of the debt forgiveness. I don't know that it's going to be debt forgiveness per se. I think it's going to be debt cancellation, because the central banks headed by the Rothschilds have created this debt society, and that debt, they were going to use it to basically crash the whole economy, transfer all of our wealth to them to pay for the debt, because they were gonna come out and say, well, guys, we've got all this debt and somebody's gonna have to pay for it. So guess what? We're gonna have to liquidate all your pension accounts and your 401ks and all that stuff to pay for it, because this system, guys, it just didn't work. But guess what? We're going to come back up with a new system. It's going to be one world currency. It's going to be a cashless society, and we won't have all these problems again. And then they'd have total control over us. So that was the objective. It's not going to be accomplished now. And we're going to have asset-backed currencies all over the world. They're going to be backed by assets. So if you're an accountant, you understand how that works, because the way it is now, it's debt-based money, which is on the wrong side of the balance sheet. You know, you have a balance sheet, and on one side are the assets, which are like the pluses, and on the other side you have the liabilities, which are the minuses. And that's how you come up with net worth. You know, you hear people talk about so and so's net worth. Well, you take the assets and you liquidate all the assets and you pay off all the liabilities, and whatever you have left is what your net worth is. And that is different from your net income, which is what goes on your tax return. But your tax return does not have a listing of your assets, nor does it have a listing of your liabilities. So anyway, having probably confused everybody now, the new system will be based on assets. So there will be backing of the currency. And that's the process that we're going to be going through here in the next probably weeks and months, is those assets that will be used to infuse liquidity into the system will be inventoried, they'll be counted, they'll be evaluated and valuated, and then money will be liquidity will be put into the system in the form of currency, and that's how the system is going to start. So and I don't know what Nesara is. I'm assuming Nesara is the US and Nesara is global. And so I guess from a certain standpoint, people talking about that in a conceptual way is probably accurate, but in a definitive way, as far as actual legislation, I'm not sure. I don't know about Nesara. I don't know what that is, but Nesara I know is not real, because we spent a few months, 3 or 4 of our guys jumped on that, and it all, it originates back with the farm claims and all those things, which are accurate, which are true. But like any other con, it goes sideways at some point down the line. And they tried to connect it to this guy who actually tried to introduce legislation, and he didn't get enough sponsors for the legislation to introduce the Nesara concept. So that's it in a nutshell. But so conceptually, it could be accurate to a certain degree, but in reality, there is no Nesara bill, so it's not legislation that needs to be enforced. So thank you for that question. And that will be the last time. That will be the last time I'm going to address that.
Well, what about the Drain the Swamp book that is associated with?
Well, that's one of the, I believe that's one of the books that, and his name escapes me at this point. I suppose I could get that, or somebody maybe in the chat knows who I'm talking about. How long have I been researching into Nesara? I researched Nesara probably 10 years ago. That idea was, floating around almost 10 years ago. So we had 3 or 4 people that looked into it. We looked into different segments of that, different issues, and nobody could confirm it. Like I say, the farm it originates with the farm claims, I believe, which are real. And then it goes to the legislation that never got enacted or never even got introduced, because this guy, he couldn't get enough signatures. He couldn't get enough sponsors to get it introduced. So you can check the congressional record if it ever, got introduced or voted on or whatever. It's going to be there. You're not going to find it. There is no Rehnquist decision. I mean, these kinds of things just don't happen. So it's a nice story, though. I mean, it's gotten everybody sidetracked, and everybody, a lot of this kind of stuff, this kind of a story is kind of like to get everybody to stand down. It's kind of like the cavalry's coming. Don't worry about it. We got this. And that's to me, that's the con. The con is that, hey, stand down, everybody. We don't need to worry about it. You don't need to do anything because it's already in play. And so, that's, the Bush crime family is notorious for cons. They have to go down in history as some of the best con men there ever were. I've done investigations on trading programs, scams, and ultimately they always connected back at somewhere in the process back to somebody connected with the CIA who was always connected with the Bush crime family. So that's just another con. And that's all I want to say about that.
Okay, and some people are wanting to know, when you're talking about this stuff, you know, what does that mean as far as their own savings or cash on hand?
Well, there's going to be a transition period, and I don't think that it's going to be noticeable from the standpoint that you're going to be able to trade out, you know, your Federal Reserve notes for the new United States currency. And I don't even know whether that is even going to be something that you will have to do. I think it's going to be something that will probably automatically happen, and you'll be probably kept whole from the standpoint it'll be 1-to-1. I don't know that you're not going to lose any money. I know everybody's thinking, should I draw money out? Should I do this? Should I do that? No, there's nothing you really need to do because everybody's going to be kept whole. Now overseas, it could be a whole different story overseas, and I'm not sure how that's going to work, but that's not anything that I think anybody should be concerned about as far as the dollars overseas. I mean, a lot of people have said that there's Federal Reserve dollars that are overseas, and then there's Federal Reserve dollars that are in the United States. And in theory, that's sort of true because, you know, the United States, the Federal Reserve notes of the United States currency overseas is used because it is the reserve currency. So therefore, everybody has to have that on hand if they want to do global business, because and we all know about the petrodollar, where OPEC, because of their close relationship, primarily Saudi Arabia's old relationship with the Bush crime family and the Rockefellers in their oil business stuff, that was one of the deals they cut, that we won't drill oil in the United States. So OPEC can become strong, but you've got to require everybody to use the dollar, which obviously strengthens the dollar from a lot of different standpoints, because you got to use it as the reserve currency. So that's really what that was all about. And you know, as we've seen now, Trump has opened up the United States for the energy business, and we now have all the energy that we'll ever need here. We don't need to buy it from overseas. We don't need to buy it from anybody. We have our own. And so that right there should tell you everything you need to know about the former administrations who would not open up our energy sector. They made us dependent on OPEC in the Middle East. So, and the reason for that was the dollar, the reserve currency. They wanted to make the petrodollar strong so that Bush and the crime families of Rockefeller and the Rothschilds could exploit that currency. They use it for the trading programs. They use it for a lot of other different things, but that made the U.S. dollar king all over the world, and that was their objective. Okay.
Okay.
Now
and
you
someone
can.
had a question about the IQDs that were.
Yeah, that's the Iraqi.
Dropped by.
Yeah, IQD. That was.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was the question?
Well, I was trying to find it actually. It looks like the chat's gone up too far and I can't see it now, but something about dropping IQDs in the US by the Bush family. So I don't know. I can't find that question now. I'm seeing a lot of comments about war castles, and which would be about the postmaster.
Do you want to take that one?
No, that's definitely a question for you. Don't change the show up on me again.
Well, are we talking about the Russell Gould thing?
Yes.
Oh, I was hoping that wasn't the case.
is the case. Does everybody know that there was a new postmaster general put into, started his position 2 days ago? DeJoy is his last name, DeJoy.
Yeah, I knew about, yeah.
Yeah. And his wife, she was an ambassador to, I can't remember who, and she is possibly going to be the ambassador to Canada. But he just started that position in 2 days ago, June 15th. And we all know that Trump wants to turn the post office into a corporation.
Yeah, and I think I've mentioned this before. I can remember back, I believe in maybe the 90s, that Ross Perot wanted to buy the post office and turn it private, and government obviously wouldn't sell it to him. And I'll say, I have some personal experience into that. One of the reasons, and it may not be as important as today as what it once was, but if you don't think that they don't read your mail, you are, well, I can just assure you that they do. They did, and they may still do. But that was one of the reasons why they weren't going to allow the post office to not be a government function, because the agencies, the 3-letter agencies, use that for their own purposes, for investigation purposes. I had a case one time in IRS CID, which is criminal investigation, and yes, he was a law enforcement officer. He's not just the auditor that sometimes you have to see if you fudge a little bit on your tax return. This was actually the enforcement division. He had a badge, he had a gun, and we worked together because we were going after the same target, and he found out we had a lawsuit. So the attorney referred him to me, and we sort of worked together. And whenever I needed to know where the target was, I could just call him, and he would check with the post office and get back with me and let me know where she was, because we had to get some papers to her or something. We had to send her some stuff. And so he let me know. I think it may be when we had to serve her in the lawsuit. But anyway, he let me know where she was. He said, hang on. I talked to him on the phone, and he comes back to me. And then my grandmother was a postmaster in a small post office in the Midwest. And one time in a weak moment, I got her to admit to me that they had some orders from time to time to open mail. So anyway, getting back to the Russell Gould thing, there was he had a partner, David W. Miller, I think it is, and they had David Wynn Miller. There you go. Yeah. And they had
David something hyphen semicolon.
Stop it. And this was the syntax thing, and Gould has reached out to our group through an intermediary, and we probably are not going to get involved with that whole situation. But it's like this. I mean, I don't know. It's a legal thing, and I'm not a lawyer, so I don't really can't give you an opinion on it, other than to say that if you think that Russell Gould, using whatever information he is using to try to give himself some sort of status, if you feel like he has got the juice to go in and take over the country and run the country, then I don't know. I got a bridge to sell you, or swampland in Florida to sell you. I mean, it's just not going to happen. So, that may be something that down the road, after we get our country back and we restore the republic, that might be a situation that may come into play at some point down the road. But, I'm not impressed with Russell Gould. I've heard him talk recently a couple times, and I don't know about the rest of you, but he sure isn't somebody I'd want running much of anything. So I hope that takes care of that question.
Okay. There is a question, or is there an area of our lives that is uncorrupted, not corrupt?
No, not from. I mean, no. I mean, I don't know. I just, I mean, that's kind of a general question, an open-ended question from the government standpoint. I think, that's why we're all supporting Trump, because I think Trump's trying to change that. I think the corruption runs deep all over the world, and I think that's part of the game. You have to be corrupt to be involved in the game, and I think we're going to see a lot of this coming to the fore in the next few months. Um, because it really runs deep. I think it runs deeper than what most people realize, and there's a control mechanism there. There's a, it's done by blackmail, it's done by coercion, it's done by payoffs. Because these guys that we see on TV, the representatives, are just the bit players, because they're only there for a short amount of time. The families, the bloodline families, I guess is the best way to put it. Their objectives is to stay in power forever. And they have been in power for lots of years. And so they acquire puppets, they pay these puppets, they intimidate these puppets, they blackmail these puppets. They've been known to, murder these puppets if they don't do what they say. And that's part of that's a lot of what we're dealing with right now. I mean, and I've said this before, if you look at trying to run for office on a local level as a Republican or a Democrat, just go through that process. Just research that. Take a few hours sometime and research what you got to go through to do that. Because the parties are the ones who run. They are the ones who run the candidates, not the other way around. The parties are the ones who determine who gets the money, who gets the backing, who gets the support, because the parties is really the controlling mechanism of that whole thing. So it's very, very difficult to get in, and to get in, you've got to basically sacrifice your soul. And you've got to do whatever the party wants you to do. And then once you go up the ladder, it's a local level, and then it's a state level. And then if you make your bones, so to speak, then you get to go to Washington, D.C. and represent your state in Washington, D.C. And by that time, you have cut so many deals, and so many people have information on you that's damaging, and you are so compromised that, I mean, and it's, the percentage is probably 90 or 95%. And I know, because I used to, when I first started in this business, that was the guy that I worked for. That's what he did. He did political investigations. We used to get dirt on political opponents. So I know how that process works. And I'm not proud to say that, but that was part of the work that I did for him. I mean, most of it was financial, but once in a while he needed some extra eyes and hands to go on cases with him that, there would be a convention that the local Democrats would have at a certain location, and he would hire some prostitutes to come, and we would film certain people with the prostitutes, and they would be in compromising situations, and they used it. So that's the way the political game works, and it just needs a total and complete clean out. Let's
Okay.
see. Okay, you got another one? Got another one?
Is Falcone still alive?
Yes.
And if so, is he part of the White Hats group?
Yes.
And I just want to say, Crash Dummy, thank you for asking. But a little tidbit, just so you know, have no idea if it's a relation or not, but Philip Falcone owns Legato, just so you know.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up. Remind me to run that down, because I was going to ask one of our guys about that, and I forgot to see. I know Falcone has a brother who is in the real estate business. The Falcone that we have, Ed Falcone. I forget his brother's name, escapes me, but his brother is with him in the real estate business, and I'm not sure that the Falcone that's involved with Legato is related, but I could probably get that question answered pretty quick.
From what I've seen, it appears that they are related, but I can't confirm that. So
Yeah, it does. I would agree.
Mhm.
I think, yeah, it does. Okay.
Just interesting tidbit.
Yeah.
And then there was a question that was kind of an open-ended, but what about the Federal Reserve?
Toast. They're toast. They'll be done. And with them will go, the IRS, because the IRS is essentially the collection agency for the Federal Reserve. I mean, some of our guys have said, "Oh, the Federal Reserve is gone now." You say that to people and they say, "Well, Jerome Powell, they're still meeting, they're still having their meetings, they're still setting rates." But I think for all intents and purposes, they have been folded under the Treasury. And once we transition to the new system, there will be no need for the Federal Reserve, and they will probably be stuck with all this outstanding debt that they've been trying to spread around all over the world.
Agree. Yeah. And why is Pence still around?
Gosh,
He's vice president.
that's a good question. I've said that before. I mean, Pence was when Trump named him vice president, that saved Pence from the embarrassment of probably not getting reelected governor in the state of Indiana, because the polls didn't show that he was going to win reelection. And that's pretty sad when you're in a conservative state like Indiana and you can't get reelected, and you're an incumbent. But we'll never know, because Trump named him. Now, some people think that was a deal that Trump cut with the Republican Party. It very well may be, but as far as I'm concerned, Pence is not as closely related to the Bush crime family as Quayle and Mitch Daniels, but he's not too far removed from that. Now, people could always change. They can change alliances, and that's going to probably be happening here as we get down to the nut cutting, as they say. People will be changing alliances. It's when the rats jump the sinking ship. So I don't know. There could be a strategic reason for having Pence where he is. But that's the best I can do. I know there's a lot of stories out there. There's a lot of talk about him being neck deep in pedophilia. I have not ever seen anything to that effect. I mean, that doesn't mean it's not true, but I've heard a lot of things, but I have not seen anything confirmed. So I can't really comment much more on that.
Some people think he's a clone.
Oh gosh, let's not go down that road.
Okay, well, we'll go down this road. Seems that Draco ETs control the bloodlines, so why do we think we will ever clean this planet up?
Well, I'm not the person to talk to about the ETs as far as the different races. What I can say that is I think there are as many benevolent ETs as there are malevolent ETs. So I think that's a battle that goes on between the ETs. I know there's a lot of consensus out there that certain ET races control certain governments, and I think I'm not sure control probably is the right word. I think that they do work together in some ways as far as trade-offs, because the ETs have the technology that we don't. So I think certain countries and certain governments have done trade-offs with them to get certain technology. But as far as that goes, I just wouldn't want to comment more than that, because I really don't know. But I do know that the technology that is available and is out there is so far advanced, that it would make your head spin if and when it gets released.
Well, I do know that there's speculation out there from scientists that we have possibly 36 species of intelligent life. But a funny question I saw was, how many species of unintelligent life could there be?
Probably just
And
as many.
I say, yeah, quite a few, quite a
I
few.
I think some of them are in Seattle right now, right? In Chaz.
Yes, they opened up the country Chaz. Yeah,
Yeah.
hey, by the way, I was wondering, does anybody know the stats from Chaz, the country, on coronavirus infections? Have they released that information yet? I'm just curious
And
if that's out there.
is that a country in Africa?
Chaz? No, that's a country in Washington.
Ah, okay.
It
Okie
is.
doke. You set me up with that one.
What about a flat tax or tax on Social Security?
I don't think there's going to be, well, from what I've been told, the flat tax is going to be a consumption tax. It'll be a sales tax, and that will replace the federal income tax. That will basically, go into running the country or the government, the federal government, and hopefully the federal government will be downsized by about 80%.
Will state taxing authorities be gone like the IRS?
That I do not know. I haven't heard anything about the state. I haven't asked that question, but I can put it on my list and ask the question. There are some states, how many? 5, 6, 7 that don't have state income tax now.
Correct.
So that's hard to say. Chad, that's right. Thank you, Kana. Chad was in Africa. That was what I was thinking about, not Chaz. My bad.
Oh, that's funny. Well, that's kind of like Tarzania. Remember? I remember.
Yeah.
When they tested the pawpaw fruit.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Okay. And what about? Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Obviously, having exact information on a variety of arrests would be hard to answer, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
As far as names.
Yeah. That's kind of a place I'd rather not go to either, because I just there's so much speculation out there. There's a lot of information that's been coming out. People get upset when you say there's been arrests made because they can't see them. And I just want to remind everybody that, you ought to go back and review the Patriot Act, because that gives the government the ability to declare you as a terrorist. And if they do, then all of especially if you're domestic, if you're in the U.S., that gives them the ability to basically suspend all your constitutional rights, not give you access to an attorney, not tell anybody where you are, not ever charge you, but detain you indefinitely. So that could be happening, and some of those, some of the arrests could be taking place. Just because we don't hear about them doesn't mean they aren't happening. And I'm sure at the appropriate time that information will be coming out. Again, I think we need to keep in mind too that there are going to be military tribunals, which will be separate and distinct from the the criminal justice system. The military tribunals will be handled by the military and not the government. So I think we need to keep those things in mind, and those are coming, and that will be made public at some point in time. But any inside information I have is just, it's foolish for me to try to share it, so I won't.
Okay, what about property taxes? What are your thoughts on that?
Property taxes are unconstitutional. So,
Absolutely.
and I have not asked that question, but I don't know if anybody will know that, because again, we asked the question about the state income tax, that's a state situation. The property taxes are local county situations. So I'm not sure, but I can assure you that it's unconstitutional that once you pay your house off, you should have it free and clear, yet you are still subject to losing your property if you don't pay your property taxes. It's unconstitutional. So hopefully when we get the republic restored, that will be thrown out the window, and they will figure out another way to fund the schools if we have such animals. I have my own opinion about that, but it's irrelevant. So anyway, we won't go down that road.
Questions about if there actually is a new king. I think that's,
I don't know. That's interesting that what is it, King? Are they calling him King John III, or is he calling himself King John III? Is that what it is? Is that
I
right?
don't know. Just,
Yeah.
if that's in place yet.
Yeah.
There was not too long ago, well, I don't know how many years ago it was, but there was somebody else who was actually traced through the bloodlines to actually be the king. I don't remember his name, but he was an elderly man. He had 2 daughters, and he had no interest in being the king. But based on the bloodline that they, showed, and this was in a documentary of some sort, he was the actual king, not. So that's just, I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah, and it seems like, and I don't know this because I don't research it because I don't have any interest in it, but it seems like forever they have said the Windsors are frauds, that they are not really the true heirs to the throne. But again, my opinion or my feeling on that is that I don't see anywhere in the world where somebody, just because they were born, get to rule over people. I think that's an old construct that needs to go. And I hope it does once we usher in a new world. I hope that goes out the window too, because I just don't think it works. It hasn't worked. And it's interesting how now, in the old days, that the king and queen used to rule, and now they have a king. They still have a king and queen, but they also have a government that sort of works beside it, independently of that. And I still haven't been able to figure out how that functions. And I know somebody is going to come along and say, oh well, that's easy and they can explain it, but I still don't understand it, and I never will. And that's probably because, and I think those of us in the US, it's just in our DNA that kings and queens are not even in the picture.
Yeah, to me, I throw that into the old guard, the 6,000-year-old guard, and with a monarchy or a king or a queen, or
Yes.
I do not see the possibility of evolution and free will, and I think that is so key in what's happening right now, that it would be impossible to have a king or a queen. My opinion.
Yeah, how would that work?
It wouldn't.
Yeah,
Along with other things that I don't know would work. But
yeah, a king and queen, and then you have self-governance. That's just not, those two just don't fit together.
no, not at all. Someone is asking about Jared Kushner. Will he be removed? From?
I don't know. I have no idea about him. Do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I
Okay.
don't. I know there's a lot of well, no, I really don't, because I in all aspects, whether I kind of relate that to what I see with some things that come into play with with other agency officials and other people, where you're trying to decide, is this person playing on the right side of the board or not? And when you're in the middle of a chess game for life, I think that you just don't know. You don't know what the setup is. You don't know who's got a poker face on and who doesn't. So I think that it's hard to say at this point. But what I do know is that if he is a concern, the powers that be know about it. So that's what I think. You fine with that?
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Will the United Nations be defunded and destroyed? And just so everybody knows, I am going up and down in these questions. It is a lot easier if you put the questions in in all
All
caps.
caps. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm trying to go up and down here in the chat just to make sure I catch them. So did you catch that last question?
The one
I said
about
that all together. Will the UN be defunded and destroyed?
Oh, yeah, I think all that old construct, because that's part of the New World Order, just like the EU was, because that's to try to move. That's a place where they try to move all of our, your freedoms into into an unaccountable, unelected group. So I think the UN. I don't think any of those, the World Bank, the IMF, the UN, NATO, all those constructs will be destroyed in the new world. I don't think they'll have a place.
What do you think will happen with Social Security, both the income and disability?
Yeah, I think that'll still stay in place. I think all those things will still stay in place. I don't think we have to worry
I
about.
mean, it's essentially your money.
Right,
So,
exactly.
you
Yeah,
know.
I mean, and if you don't already know, the Social Security system in the United States is a Ponzi scheme, and that's the only place that it's legal is for the government, because all the Social Security that we have paid into all of our lives, and it's not, what do the liberals call it? And it's not not handouts, but entitlements. Is that what they call it? And it's not
Yeah.
entitlements. We've paid into it. If you've paid into it like I have for 40 years, um, it's owed to you, but that's not the way they work it. They use our money anytime that you have to pay Social Security taxes on your wages. Then they're paying the people who are on Social Security now. And I had a finance professor in college that informed all of us in the class that by the time we retired, that there would not be any money left in Social Security, because it is a Ponzi scheme, and there would not be enough people in the workforce to support the big numbers of retired people who would retire with the baby boom generation, so to speak. So that was kind of an eye opener way back in college. But I don't think I don't think we have to worry about that, because with the new currency system, the new financial system, that's not going to be a problem.
What about the UN and their jurisdiction over Native American reservations? I'm like for that person to maybe elaborate on that, because I'm not so sure they have jurisdiction, so to speak.
Yeah, I had that question in the Discord today, and I'm not really that familiar with it, but it has something to do with, I think, and I have not researched this, that the Native American tribes or reservations have cut some deal with the UN for security, and I just don't know. Do you know anything about that?
Okay, well, I know the many of the tribal reservations and the tribal council did go to the UN in regards to getting assistance with the pipeline, the pipeline that we haven't heard about in I don't know how long.
Mm-hmm.
But there was they did reach out for involvement with the United Nations in regards to the pipeline. As far as signing anything or signing any agreement for, because I'm to understand that people are leading that into that the UN trips are going to invade our country because these tribal councils have agreed to it. I also saw where there was a story or an article out there where George Floyd's brother allegedly asked for the UN troops to intervene on police brutality. Is there something to the UN? Is there something to the UN troops, and how this, could have played out or possibly could have played out? I do think there is something to it. I don't think that there's I don't know of an actual agreement. I'd like to see it myself in writing in regards to the actual agreement where they would come in. I really don't know. I have seen a lot of information about the tribes reaching out to the UN for assistance with the pipeline. I believe there was an actual hearing about it. But I know that people are concerned about that because that is essentially how UN troops would come in here and quote, take over.
Right. And that's not going to happen.
Yeah. No. No, it's not going to happen. Now, is that a chess move? Is that possibly a chess move? Well, there are a lot of things that indicate that was definitely in the works, or part of the plan, or part of a plan of some sort. There are too many things that indicate that. For instance, outside of the two things I just talked about, even in that new country Chaz or Chop or whatever the hell it's called now, excuse me, crazy town. There was some exchanging of hands as to who was the president there. I think they were already overthrown, I think, within the first day that it opened. And then there was some dedication proclamation that was done in regards to handing that, essentially handing that, that area over to, back to the tribal lands. There was a big ta-da about that. So I do think that there is something in regards to recognizing, the history here of tribal ownership, I guess you could say, or tribes outside of the reservations in regards to whose land this is in the first place, if you want to go down that path.
Right.
But and then that seemingly involves, or leads to one to think that it could involve the UN. But is it actually going to happen? Absolutely not. In my opinion, absolutely not. I don't believe that.
Yeah. Yeah, Diane, I'm where Tori mentioned about the UN access to the native reservations. I don't think it's anything that we really need to worry about.
Somebody wants to know if you can answer this question. Is Michael Cottrell sober? I don't know who Michael Cottrell is.
Oh, Cottrell. Yeah, he was a partner with Wanta at one point in time, and they had a falling out, and Cottrell has written
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So,
all right.
yeah. And Cottrell is trying to stay relevant. I think maybe at one point, if he had played his cards right, he could have been involved with the reset, but I think he's kind of killed his own chances. He's more of a academician than he is a practical guy, if that makes sense to anybody. So, yeah, but I don't think he's got any major role to play in what's coming. Currency reset timeline, it's happening. It's going to be happening in the next few weeks. It's going to take some time for that to propagate through the system. I'm sure we'll get an announcement whenever that's ready to go for the public, so that the public has confidence that everything is in place and everything's solid. But I don't have a timeline on that.
Okay, what about gold that belongs to us that is held in China?
I'm not sure what you're referring to there, because reality is based on based on history, China probably has more gold than any other country in the world, and that's primarily due to the Silk Road.
Use of blockchain in the new system.
I don't think so. I think blockchain has a function in the future, but I don't think it's with the monetary system, at least right now, because It's just a difficult concept, and you have to introduce a new system that everybody understands. That's from the person with the highest IQ down to the person with the lowest IQ. And I think blockchain possibly does have applications for other things like real estate, for example. Um, but I just haven't heard it being mentioned very much in the new financial system. But it may have a place somewhere. It just won't be throughout the system.
Can you explain the internet blackout that will supposedly happen?
Yeah, I did address that. I saw that. I don't think that that's going to be I don't think that's going to be a situation. If there is an internet blackout, I think that's when we'll have a changeover to the quantum internet.
Mm-hmm.
No news on the
See ya.
Leo Wanta money. Yeah.
How about, I'm sorry, that super chat. Thank you, Truth Bomb, for doing that. When it came in, it scooted my chat up, so now I got off my line of questioning here. There was pyramids, any powers in them or concerns with them?
Oh gosh, I don't know about that, about the pyramids. And I don't want to give any investment advice, guys, as far as real estate goes. Sorry. I just want to stay away from that. Do you want to take the JFK Jr. thing?
What's the question?
Is JFK Jr. alive? And if so, would he be Trump's running mate in 2020?
Whoa. I don't, I haven't seen him myself personally. I've seen a lot of pictures, but I mean, I would love for him to knock on my door. That would be so epic. But I mean, do I think it's a possibility that he's alive? I absolutely do. If anyone is if you spent 5 minutes looking at how they searched for the plane and the bodies, how they all of a sudden found them, whisked them off, did autopsies, and had them ready to go for a burial at sea the next morning at 9 o'clock in the morning. And they did a burial at sea for JFK Jr., his wife, and her sister, which, if you know anything about burials at sea, that is just absolutely not going to happen. Then there are a lot of questionable things that go along with the story of his death. And there are a lot of things that indicate, based on the George News, the covers alone are, I mean, they played out our future over the 20 years that he's been gone. But I would like to say that I believe that it's quite possible that he is, and that he'll make an appearance. I know that the story is that he'll come out in July of this year. But the fact of the matter is, there's been a lot of misinformation when that's been said, because it's been related that Q is the one who indicated that JFK would be revealed in July of this year, and that's not true. That is absolutely not true. So do I think it's possible, and have I heard that is the case? Absolutely. I know you might have a little more information on that, but do I hope that it's true and that he would have an opportunity to that he would have an opportunity for some sort of justice for his father? Well, in a right world, that's the way it would go, in my opinion. I'm going to let you take over for a minute. I've got to just take care of something for a second. So talk away.
Yeah, sure. Gosh, I don't know. These questions have been going so fast. Thank you, Vigilant Blade. Appreciate that. Let me see what I can. I guess we were talking about JFK Jr. There's some, I probably shouldn't, I don't want to talk about that. I can't add anything that uh, you've already said. Although I wonder if you go back and you read some of the George magazines, and I think those have become very, very valuable in regards to how much they cost now. And sometimes you can only see the covers. You wonder if JFK Jr. didn't have access to he didn't have access to the looking glass. I wonder about that because it seems like a lot of the things or some of the things that were talked about in that magazine were in the about the future. So would you agree with that? Did you hear that last part?
Yeah, I do agree with that. And I will say, okay, there's something that has fascinated me for a couple of months now, or I guess, yeah, it's been a couple of months. I mean, time flies. And I believe it was released on April 10th. And I know, we all had that date in our head for a while, the 4/10/20. And it was the song by Bob Dylan. I don't know who all, the 17-minute song by Bob Dylan. And there's a line in there that has fascinated me. Well, since it came out, as a matter of fact, and that was the line. I don't know it verbatim, but the line where they talked about when it's kind of graphic. So I guess, we're all adults here, I'm assuming. So, but it was something about they dug and dug for his soul. Do you remember the line? But they couldn't find it.
I do.
Yeah, that struck me for some reason, and it really resonated with me for some reason. That line about digging for his soul, and I think that there's something very significant in regards to understanding what that might mean as far as your soul is concerned, and our vessels that carry our souls around. So I do believe, though, that based on the magazine covers, based on a lot of information that you can see out there in regards to Trump, and in historical, documented. The books, there's artwork, there are a lot of things out there that indicate to me that absolutely that the looking glass is played a significant role in all of this on both sides, good and bad.
Yeah.
And we talked about that in our last live. So I don't know if that, these questions are from people who may not have heard that last live, but yes, I think the looking glass is key here, and I think that it has everything to do with, and we probably, we're going on 2 hours here, so I don't know how long you want to stay on the line. But we talked about the looking glass in great detail. We talked about the one thing that was never able to be changed based on the different probabilities or the different decisions that were made, and in the end result, based on taking control, and that was the reaction of the people, and that the reaction of the people could never be altered. One thing that I feel, though, which is a topic that we would definitely, probably show some documentation on, and go into probably a pretty lengthy conversation about, is the fact that I feel the last ditch attempt to try and alter that fate, I guess you could say, or if that's what you want to call it, or that outcome on the reaction of the people, is the vaccine being RNA based. And I do feel that is something that has kind of that might have something to do with why things can be a little more fluid right now than was expected.
Yeah, I think just
by
yeah,
that?
Yeah, and I think just to digress a little bit, I think this coronavirus is, uh, they never do just one thing to accomplish one objective. They do one thing to accomplish many objectives. This is one of those cases. I think, and you and I talked about this earlier today, I believe, about uh, all the contact tracing, all of the telehealth, all of these various things that they want to do to change the way healthcare is administered, in addition to the vaccines, was all in Obamacare, basically. So, Trump took the teeth out of that when he got rid of the mandate. It basically, dismantled Obamacare. This is another attempt, I think, in addition to some other things, to sort of bring Obamacare back as a necessity because of this pandemic. So I think that's one of the things that it's going through. But excuse me, I think also the vaccination has a possibility. The bad vaccinations that are out there that Gates and his people are involved with may have the ability to change your RNA, which could, I suppose, or maybe in their mind, they're hoping that it may change the outcome that Looking Glass had given to everybody as far as the timeline after 2012. So I know that was something that we were going to touch on last time. Um, and that is that your opinion also on that?
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
On the
The last part.
vaccination, the vaccination that they want to roll out, the bad guys, the Gates people want to roll out. Do you feel like that could have something to do with changing or altering our RNA, which could possibly affect the 2012 Looking Glass timeline? That's inevitable.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do feel that way.
Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we'll see how that works, how that goes.
I do. I feel that this is this has been a battle, a silent war for much longer than what we've been aware of, as far as Q posts or Trump being our president, anything else. I mean, I feel like this silent war has been going on for quite some time. Obviously, one of the wrenches that was not expected was Trump winning. But I do feel like there have been moves and counter moves that have been, going on at quite a heightened pace, actually, for the last 3 years, because, these people that all of a sudden turned on Trump, and this was well before he was, before they had any idea that he would even have a chance of winning. They, as a matter of fact, thought that it was in the bag, that he wouldn't win. But they already started turning on him. All of these talk show hosts, celebrities, other politicians that, up until the point where it seemed like there might be teeth for Donald Trump to, to even, secure the Republican position for a candidate. They went after him like sharks, like sharks with fresh meat. And to me, if you look back in time, at that point, when it became apparent that he might actually, that he might actually have a chance, they turned on him so quickly. It was incredible. And that tells me a lot about what they already knew, that he would be bringing to the table, what the possibility really is. So that indicates to me that maybe that possibility was there, was something that was in play, in regards to this Looking Glass. And bear with me here when I'm saying this, because I know that that they thought, well, he'd never win. But you have to wonder if something like that, if that wrench came into play, and it then appeared that he actually had a fighting chance, is there a possibility that when you do choose these different realities, you do choose these different probabilities, and you explore these, there is some information out there that supports the fact that once a future choice is viewed or seen, whether that's remote viewing or Project Looking Glass, or there are a couple of different ways of trying to envision the future through Project Pegasus. But once that is viewed, there is information out there that supports the fact that once it's viewed, it can be changed. It can be, the outcome can actually change based on the fact that it can be viewed. And I say that because, I think it's fairly obvious to me anyway, and I can only speak for myself and what my position is here and what my thoughts are, and I view this from knowing for myself that the Looking Glass was used by the opposition, by the deep state, by the bad guys. How is it that they wouldn't have had alternative methods in place, or alternative choices in place, or be prepared for certain outcomes? And they obviously were not prepared for Trump. And that's because I feel like, when you have this probability of the future being viewed or being observed by others, that it can alter that reality or can change that reality. I do feel that was something that could have been used in the favor of, the White Hats. What do you think about that?
Yeah, and I think that the Looking Glass. I mean, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that is that not alien technology?
Yeah. Yes.
And
Yes.
and see, there are, I guess the best way to put it, or maybe something that everybody might be familiar with, is the computer simulations in the Department of Defense on war games. If we fire the first shot at Russia and they respond and we respond, and who's going to win? I mean, and there's there was a movie, gosh, I can't remember the name of it now. Matthew Broderick, hacked into a computer and screwed up the Department of Defense, and so anyway, yeah, I mean, it may be War Games, maybe the name of it, but anyway, so there are computer simulations that do war games, right? So they, believe me, the think tanks that are out there do these kinds of forward thinking, future possibility scenarios all the time. They are feeding things into the computer to see what the outcome will be if they do this, if they make this decision or that decision. And that's basically what Looking Glass was, only it is a much more sophisticated device. And after 2012, they said no matter what kind of decisions were made, it would not change the outcome. That at some point down the road, eventually, that all the lies will be exposed. Woods described it as ascension. He described it as the awakening. The only thing that we didn't find out was what was the timeline on that. And I think you said this best in the last podcast about it's like a game of chess, and checkmate. We've already hit checkmate. It's just a matter of both players know that there's that in 6 or 7 moves it's going to be checkmate. I think Bill Woods explained that too, and it's just a matter of who's going to do what, but the outcome is already decided. So I guess they could probably postpone it, or they could delay it by trying different things, and I think that's probably what we're seeing right now. Because I think they probably had a different tack that they were going to use to try to change that based on Hillary winning the election. And since she didn't win the election, it's really put them in a bind, because I don't think they were prepared for that eventuality. So at least that's the way it seems to me.
Yeah. That's a deep subject, that's for sure. But I do believe that we are looking at technology in use that all of these answers will be disclosed in the near future, is what I feel.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're coming down to it close. It's close at hand now. So I think we won't have to wait too much longer to find out when that's going to
No,
happen.
but I do feel that it will probably get a little bit worse before it gets better.
Yes, I think
We'll see
there's
more chaos before it gets better.
yeah, I think there's more pain coming for us. And again, it's just part of the process of what we're going to have to go through because this has been going on for so long and it's the problem is so deep that it's going to take a root canal to get it out. And of course, if everybody's been through a root canal, they know how painful that is. But you get through it and you get over it, and everything's fine. So I think that's really what we're facing here in our very near future. And when we get through it and we're on the other side, um, I think life will be much much better. And we didn't talk about a moneyless society tonight, but maybe we'll do that at some point down the road, huh?
Yes, I think we can do that down the road. I mean, I think I've seen a lot of questions about when is the transition going to be, when is the, and I know that that's in relation to the financial transition mostly. My opinion is, what's happening behind the scenes is behind the scenes, and that, won't come to fruition until it's supposed to. I think that there are a lot of avenues that need to be disabled long before there can be any kind of new monetary system in place or support system. I don't know if that monetary system really involves so much anything like what we've all lived all our lives. I hope it's not anything like what we've lived all our lives. I don't envision that any kind of currency system or monetary system is could be set up where it wouldn't be a huge manipulation for large populations of people, is my opinion. And so, and I do not feel, I feel that money is whatever it is, I feel that it's subjected too much to manipulation, to power, control, and it leaves out the ability to focus on evolution, free will, fellow man, fellow species, however you want to look at that. And so and it's definitely a conversation we can have at a later date or on another show, because it's pretty detailed. But I think that, whether it's in regards to alleviating debt, getting rid of mortgage payments, getting rid of credit card payments, student debt, whatever, not having property taxes, or some sort of currency. There are so many levels to that, as far as considering, large amounts of people that experience life at so many different levels, that I envision that would have to be taken into consideration in all of this. And ultimately, I would prefer to see a system in place that isn't about controlling us, that we aren't working for the dollar, but we have the ability to evolve and exercise our free will as I dream and hope that it was meant to be. So
Yeah, I would agree with that. I just don't think we should be limited by how much money we have, because that seems like that's what everything's based on, and that's just a control mechanism that it's time to go away. I do feel like our new system will be a transition system to a moneyless society, which is different than a cashless society. I know somebody put something in there about that, but a moneyless society is when there's no money. And
mhm.
evolved societies work on that. That's how they function, and it's all about how you contribute, what you contribute. And so anyway, if you have nothing more to add, let's cut this. We've been going 2 hours, and I think that's plenty for tonight. I know you've got a trip to go on tomorrow, so.
Yes, yep, yep. And thanks to everyone in the chat. I know I missed a ton of questions, but this won't be the last time we do this. We'll do this again in the near future. We'll figure out, we'll definitely be doing these probably more often, especially because right now, heck, you don't know if we're going to be online or not with, I mean, yesterday, was that yesterday? I think that, or the day before, where, you know, the entire country was experiencing network issues of some sort.
That was was that not almost every carrier, cell phone carrier?
I mean, I did experience some incredible lag, but I was still able to make calls and had data service and all that. But it seemed to be every servicer for cell phones. I think there was some Facebook Messenger issues, some gaming issues, all kinds of things. But you know, primarily the two companies that had the biggest issues were are companies that already use their GWiz, from what I understand, or it's already in place for, you know, most of those areas. So it did get pretty crazy. I did see one question that I do want to touch on really quickly, because it's a hot topic right now, and I know there are things happening as we speak in regards to this, and that's the Atlanta case with the two officers. I did see earlier that the Georgia Bureau of Investigation was completely taken aback that there were charges filed, and that they were blindsided in regards to the charges that were filed. I'm calling BS on the two body cams that fell to the ground, but yet they're claiming that, you know, somewhere they caught on body cam that these two officers, after this man was injured, went and stood on his shoulders and kicked him in the stomach, something like that. I haven't seen that footage at all. I don't think anybody has. I'm not even sure that claim is legitimate. But I know that there are a lot of officers that are seemingly not answering calls, not answering protest calls, 911 calls. Boy, I've got a mixed bag there, because, you know, as much as I understand that the frustration and the amount of abuse that the American people in general and the police departments across the nation have endured because of one knee from a criminal mind in Minnesota is appalling to me. Everyone should be thankful that we have people who are brave enough every day to go out there and try and enforce some sort of law and order for our own protection, for our protection. And I'm not saying policing the people. I am saying, you know, there is a need for law and order. There is a need for police officers, because there are dangerous people out there. And, you know, we are seeing an incredible abuse across the nation for one person's decision. And I think it's shameful. And now we're seeing a domino effect here. And this is what I mean when I say that, you know, I think things will become a lot worse before they get better. I don't expect that to go on too long, but I think that those officers being charged is absolutely ridiculous. So that was a question in the chat, but I wanted to talk about current information really quick before we departed.
Yeah.
Also, I do want to mention too, I know you're going to have something to say about all of this, but in regards to the transition, what I talked about earlier, that things need to be, taken down. And today was an indication that we're going to see a huge domino effect in regards to, these pedophile rings being torn down. And, you know, there was a big 17 person arrest in Florida today. There was one in Germany, because this is a worldwide issue. There was one in Germany a couple days ago. There are things occurring in front of our very eyes that people need to pay attention to, and not focus so much on this tyrannical, quote unquote, New World Order movement that, you're being blanketed with by the mainstream media. Pay attention to these details. They're important because it is the beginning of the end.
Yeah, and wasn't this guy in Atlanta? Didn't he just get released from jail for abusing his children?
I don't know the details on that. I stuck to the actual event. And the fact is, if you're going to, it didn't happen once, it happened twice. I mean, where he fell asleep in his car, not once, but twice, because the first time I think the cop was going to let him go or something like that. But if you look at the actual event where they had a very long, very polite conversation with the man. They asked him to do a breathalyzer. He, blew over the limit. And then, when you're at that point, you are being arrested, and
Right.
he resisted arrest. He stole a taser, which is, definitely considered a deadly weapon, because if you're tased with it, I don't know if you've ever been tased before, but you are immobile for at least 5 seconds. And 5 seconds when you're laying on the ground and you have someone who's, acting in a criminal manner on top of you, and they could take your gun and shoot you in the head. That's a problem. And you're a police officer, you are to protect and serve, and they were within every bit of their rights as police officers for how they handled that, every bit. So just absolutely. Yeah, he was released from jail because of COVID.
Okay. Yeah.
So I don't know what he was in there for.
And I heard something tonight that indicated that they charged him already with all that because they were concerned they were going to have riots. So now the mobs are controlling the police departments. And I will say there is one police department, law enforcement agency, I would like to see them defund. Can you guess which one that is?
LVMPD?
No. No, I said no. I didn't. I said law enforcement. So that's broad. The FBI.
Oh, well, of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just think that.
I'm sorry. We were focused on police there.
Right.
So.
Right. But
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, that was a transition. But anyway, yeah, and I would like to see them defunded. I would like to see the CIA defunded. I would like to see a few other departments in our government reconstituted the way I think they were meant to be, as opposed to the way they've been corrupted. So, okay, with that, I want to kind of wind us down here. I just want to say everyone is invited, if you're not already in our Discord chat, to come over. You can find that on the website, whitehatsreport.com website, on the homepage down on the right-hand side. We have people from several countries. We have a lot of people in there from Japan. We have people from Canada. We have people from Germany. So we've got a pretty diverse group. There's a lot of good information that flows through there every single day. We have pretty good discussions on a regular basis. So I want to invite everybody to come over there too. Stop by our Patreon if you want to participate in that. Also, we've got our retail store still going. I hope that most of the delays now are behind us as we're starting to get caught up on some of the back orders. There are still some things that are still delayed, but nothing we can do about it. But I think they are getting better and they are catching up. So we appreciate everyone's support. We will try to do more often. We will try to do these live streams more often. Maybe sometimes we'll just have Q&A and go from there, and that gives us an opportunity to talk about a lot of things and get a lot of questions answered. So without further ado, I'm going to sign off. I want to thank White Hat Reporter, as always, for making all of this happen. I want to thank Truth Bomb for being our guy, helping us out in the chat and behind the scenes, and supporting us as we support him on his channel. I think he's going to have a live tomorrow night, so I would recommend everybody check that out, because he's always talking about current events and they're always important events. And also, hopefully, maybe he'll share some of his boat pictures from this weekend. So I want to thank everybody for being here. Paladin out.